want to give I just want to give on a personal note, I just started Invisalign a couple days ago. So if you cannot understand what I'm saying, please absolutely feel free to say, Your Honor, I'm sorry, could you say that again? And I will do the best of my ability to make sure that you can understand me. So I will not be offended. Okay, with that being said, I think we can go ahead and get started. Let's call the case of United States v. Kara Bassett. My name is Judge Lighty. Scoring judges, please look to the two buttons on the lower left side of your screen and turn off your audio and your video. And these should remain off until the trial ends. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. And this means that the only people on the screen right now should be the advocates and myself. So go ahead and take a moment to do that. Okay. All right. Can the attorneys please make their appearances?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, why don't we start with the government?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Christine Guarnieri, and today I represent the United States of America. I am joined by my co-counsel, Maida Durachetti.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Okay, got a little feedback, that's all right. And I'm sorry, could you just pronounce your last name one more time for me? I want to make sure that I get it right, counsel.
Christine Guarnieri.
Guarnieri, okay, wonderful. And defense?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Hunter Wright, counsel for the defense. I'm joined today by Cara Catelier.
Good morning.
Before proceeding, we do have a few preliminary matters we'd like to address.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, first, Your Honor, we'd like to invoke Rule 615 that constructively sequesters witnesses from trial today.
Granted.
We would like to remind the court of Stipulation 7, which states that Exhibits 4 through 33 are already in evidence and can be used at any time by either counsel.
Is that your understanding as well, Ms. Guarnieri?
Yes, Your Honor.
Granted.
We'd like to remind the court of Stipulation 9, which states that witnesses need not identify the defendant.
That's fine with me.
And we ask that witnesses in today's trial are pre-sworn in for the convenience of the court.
That's fine with me as well.
With that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Ms. Guarnieri, I'm sorry, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you have any pre-trial matters that you'd like to address with the court?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution asks that if there's ever an issue with my audio or my camera, to please interrupt whatever I'm doing and let me know.
Sure, not a problem.
And with that, the prosecution is ready to proceed.
All right, and then why don't we go ahead and move to opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor.
And again, just before you start, I'd just like to remind everyone to make sure that you're in speaker view, so that way you can have Ms. Guarnieri's full attention. When you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. She wanted to take control, so she had to take his life. The defendant, Kara Bassett, wanted complete control over the elephant park she shared with her husband, Don. So she eliminated the one thing that stood in her way, Don Clark. You see, Don was running the park like a zoo. And Kara, well, she wanted it to be run like a sanctuary. So in May of 2017, she started planning how she would take control. Today, you'll hear that in May of 2017, the defendant had Don Clark sign a power of attorney document that gave her complete control over all of Don's assets if he simply disappeared. You'll hear that on August 18th, 2017, the defendant made sure that he did. On that day, after all the employees left the park, she pounced. She injected Don with a lethal tranquilizer and a dosage high enough to kill him 10 times. She then loaded his lifeless body into a wheelchair, rolled that wheelchair into a van, and drove 139 miles to the isolated Big Gum Swamp, where she dumped his body in the alligator-infested waters. Nobody has seen or heard from Don Clark since that day. Members of the jury, today I represent the United States of America, and as the prosecution, we hold the burden of proof. We will prove to you today, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant murdered Don Clark with malice aforethought, meaning she planned to and intentionally killed Don Clark. You see, the defendant thought her plan was perfect, but when the FBI started investigating, they started finding the mistakes in her plan, pieces of evidence she left behind. First, you'll hear from Agent Steph Branham, and she'll tell you about the GPS records that link the defendant to Big Gum Swamp. And she'll tell you about the forensic evidence that also ties Kara Bassett to the same swamp. Second, you'll hear about the murder weapon. You'll hear that the defendant was always meticulous about her log of these tranquilizers until 2 weeks before Dawn disappeared. And finally, you'll hear about what the defendant did during the week her husband was missing. The defendant never called Dawn. She never texted Dawn. She waited an entire week to report her husband missing. Today in trial, you'll hear that the defendant was the only person with the means, motive, and opportunity to kill Don Clark. Today, we will satisfy our burden and prove to you that the defendant murdered Don Clark. Because the defendant wanted to take control. And on August 18th, she took Don Clark's life to get it. That's why at the end of this trial, I will ask you to find the defendant guilty for Don Clark's murder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guarnieri. We'll give the scoring judges just one moment. Mr. Wright, if you want to go ahead and get prepared for your opening statement. Whenever you're ready.
The government's case cuts corners. It's August 18th of 2017. Don Clark receives a text message on his phone from his business partner in Costa Rica. This is it. This is the moment he's been waiting for months, and it's finally gonna happen. He says, I need to take this. Then he walks away, dialing a phone number on a cell phone. While he talks to his business partner and they work out the details, he thinks to himself, can I really do this? Just walk away from everything I have here at the Elephant Park. At 11:14 p.m. that evening, Don Clark texts his wife, going out for a while. Then he goes and he steps into his van. He smiles. That's the last time he'll ever visit the Elephant Park again. Members of the jury, the government just stood here and told you that this case is about Don Clark being killed by Kara Bassett. They'll have the burden of proof in today's case. They'll have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That means that if you find that there's even one reasonable alternative to the evidence you hear in trial today, the law requires you find in favor of Kara Bassett. Today you're going to hear from a witness named Jo Young. She's a television producer who filmed everything. The elephants, the guests at the park, the staff members at the park. And through that, she became close with both Don Clark and Kara Bassett. She'll tell you that on multiple occasions, she was able to see how Don Clark ran the park, like a business. He didn't care about the elephants. What he cared about was going to Costa Rica whenever he could. Now, between Joe Young and the government's witness, Agent Steph Branham, you'll see that the government's investigation cut corners. How they ignored witnesses, how they ignored potential suspects, and how they failed to pursue reasonable alternatives to the evidence. A moment ago, Ms. Guarnieri came up here and she told you how you'd hear about algae that would place my client at the park. But what you didn't hear her tell you is that that algae was never looked for at the elephant park. They never tested the water. They never tested the mud. She told you about a syringe, a missing syringe with a lethal dose of carfentanil. She didn't tell you they never found that syringe. She can't prove that carfentanil has anything to do with this case. She certainly didn't tell you about off-the-books money that Don Clark had set aside, enough money to purchase properties in Costa Rica. Members of the jury, by the end of today's trial, it'll be clear that Don Clark isn't dead. The government will fail to meet their burden because they cut corners. We'll ask for a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Again, scoring judges, if you could just take a moment to score both performances. And before Ms. Guarnieri calls her first witness, I'm going to ask everyone to switch over to gallery view at this point. Again, that button is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and this will allow you to see both the attorney and the witnesses at the same time. And to Ms. Guarnieri and Mr. Wright, if I could just give you one point of order from the court. I should have mentioned this earlier, but because of the nature of this virtual trial, it is a little bit difficult to know when someone is, especially during objection arguments, when someone's done making their argument. The only thing I would ask is, I know sometimes we kind of rush to ask the judge if you can be heard. Just pause and take a moment, just make sure your opposing counsel's finished with their argument, and I'm of course going to give you an opportunity to respond. But if you could just make sure that opposing counsel's done before you interject. With that being said, I think we're ready. Ms. Guarnieri, whenever you're ready to go.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Steph Branham to the stand. Ms. Branham, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning. My name is Agent Steph Branham. I have been working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation since 2002. I'm currently a senior special agent.
What's your relation to today's case?
Well, as soon as Don Clark was reported missing, it was my job to go and search the elephant park. Me and my team investigated, and I was the lead investigator.
Have you investigated disappearance cases before?
Yes, I actually have. I've actually done over 100 cases.
I'd like to talk to you about the investigation you mentioned. When was Don reported missing?
Don Clark was reported missing on August 25th, 2017, excuse me.
Was that the day you found Don Clark went missing?
We theorized that he went missing August 18th of that year.
Who was the last person to see Don Clark?
The last person reported to have seen Don Clark was Kara Bassett.
Where did she say she saw him last?
At their home in the elephant park.
What time was this at?
It was about from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Did you find any evidence that anyone left the elephant park after 9 p.m.?
Yes, we actually checked the elephant park's Chevrolet Express, and we checked those GPS records.
My co-counsel could put those up on the screen. Are these the GPS records you reviewed?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell the court what these GPS records told you?
They showed us that the van was driven to Big Gum Swamp and arrived there at 11:17 p.m. Excuse me, it was taken from Big Gum Swamp at 11:17 p.m. and arrived there at 1:26 and was parked there until 2:10. And then it was driven and arrived at Cary Bellion Airport at 4:26 a.m.
Could you describe what the Big Gum Swamp is?
The Big Gum Swamp is an isolated area, a body of water that has algae, alligators, stuff like a normal swamp would.
Did you do any forensic testing of anything from Big Gum Swamp?
Yes, we did. We took samples of algae from the Big Gum Swamp and took it to our forensics lab.
Did you send anything else to this forensic lab to compare to the algae?
Yes, we actually sent algae that we found on the defendant's boots to the lab as well.
Was there anything else you sent over for algae testing?
Yes, we sent algae that we found on the underside of the Elephant Park's wheelchair and the driver's side of the Elephant Park's van to be tested as well.
Could you tell the court what this document is on the screen?
The document is that forensics report.
What did this forensic report tell you about the algae you sent in?
It told us that all the algae, the samples of it, were most likely originated from Big Gum Swamp.
And could you tell the court what kind of algae this was?
It was a rare combination of algae, Cladophora and Spirogyra. It's very rare for them to be found together, according to the report.
I'd like to talk to you about your investigation at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park. When you got to the property, did you find any potentially dangerous substances?
Yes, we found that the Elephant Park had access to carfentanil.
Did you review any
Your
documents?
Honor, lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm objecting lack of foundation as to how Agent Brandon would know that carfentanil is a dangerous substance.
Ms. Guarnieri, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. My next question is asking if she conducted any research regarding carfentanil, and I will be laying that foundation.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and, I'm sorry, Mr. Wright?
No, Your Honor, I was agreeing with opposing counsel. If that's what they're going to do, then I'll withhold any further objections.
All right, and why don't we proceed with the foundation as to the research?
Did you conduct any research into this carfentanil?
Yes, we researched the MSDS sheet that was at the Elephant Park.
Is this the MSDS sheet you reviewed?
Yes, ma'am.
What did this document tell you about the danger levels of carfentanil?
Well, it told us that the carfentanil's danger level was 5,000 more times toxic than heroin. And that if 1 milligram was swallowed or injected, it would be fatal to a human being.
Did you ever ask the defendant if she knew about the danger level?
Yes, we did. And when we asked, she laughed.
Was there any way the park kept track of their carfentanil usage?
Yes, they were required to keep a logbook of all the carfentanil that was used.
Agent Branham, could you identify these two exhibits?
Yes, Exhibit 19 is of the carfentanil logbook, and Exhibit 18 is a vial of carfentanil.
Are any of the administrators on this log the defendant?
Yes, ma'am, about 4 of them.
And which initials are these?
Your Honor, lack of foundation.
I'm sorry, Ms. Guarnieri, would you like to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness has personal knowledge to this, as Kara told her that the CC on the log was hers.
May I
Okay.
be heard, Your Honor?
Of course.
If that's the case, then we ask that that foundation be first laid onto the record.
Ms. Guarnieri, I agree with Mr. Wright, so why don't you go ahead and lay that foundation, and then you can provide that conclusion about which ones specifically are from Kara Bassett.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you ask the defendant if any of these initials belong to her?
Yes, and she informed me that the initials CC were in fact hers, considering that her name was Kara Clark at the time. She has now since been remarried.
Did anything stand out to you about this log and Kara Clark's initials?
Yes, ma'am. As you can see from the carfentanil logbook, all times that she had used the carfentanil, she had listed the elephant that she was using it for. But as you can see from that logbook, she didn't list the elephant that was being used for, supposedly.
Did you find any evidence in your investigation that the syringe on August 1st was used on an elephant?
No, we did not, ma'am.
When you got to the elephant park, was it still being run?
Yes, it was.
Who was running it?
Kara Bassett.
How did she have the authority to run the park when Dawn disappeared?
Well, close to his disappearance, Mr. Clark actually signed over his power of attorney to Kara Bassett.
Did you ever communicate with Dawn Clark's attorney?
Yes, we did. Mandy Timonelli actually sent us a letter.
Did this letter tell you anything about the power of attorney document?
Yes, it told us that a disappearance clause was being added, which we found out was not the actual standard for most power of attorneys.
Did this letter tell you whose idea the disappearance clause was?
Yes, it did. It said that it was Miss Bassett's idea, ma'am.
And what was the total value of assets Miss Bassett gained control of when Dawn disappeared?
Well, the stocks and bonds itself would cost up to about $1.9 million, but the assets itself, we were informed by Miss Bassett, was about $8 million.
I prepared a timeline, if my co-counsel could put that up. Do all of these events on the timeline look accurate to you?
Yes, they do.
I'd like to talk to you about the 19th to the 24th.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you find any evidence that Dawn Clark communicated with the defendant from the 19th to the 24th?
No, we did not.
Did you find any communication from the defendant to Dawn Clark from the 19th to the 24th?
No, we did not, ma'am.
Did you find any evidence of any activity on Dawn's accounts after August 18th?
We didn't find any either.
When was the last time in your investigation that anyone has seen Dawn Clark?
It was about August 18th, 2017.
Objection, Your Honor. Before proceeding, I have an objection as to the demonstrative. I believe it's more prejudicial than probative.
Hey, Mr. Wright, can you explain that?
Yes, of course. This demonstrative exhibits a timeline that shows a 1 week in which opposing counsel's elicited testimony regarding how Kara Bassett didn't contact her husband for 1 week. I believe this is more prejudicial than probative, as the expansiveness of the demonstrative elicits more of a feeling for the members of the jury that this took place over a much larger time than just 1 week.
Ms. Guarnieri?
Your Honor, the dates on the timeline that we included are the relevant dates as to my line of questioning from the 18th to the 25th. We didn't include, we wanted it to cover the whole screen as so the jury could get the best vision of this timeline. It's not more prejudicial than it is probative, as it's laying out exactly what happened from the day he disappeared to when the FBI was brought on to investigate, Your Honor.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Of course.
In that case, we would ask for a limiting instruction that members of the jury, while they are able to see the demonstrative, perceive this as only taking place over 1 week for what it is.
Would you be okay with that, Ms. Guarnieri?
Yes, Your Honor, that's what the demonstrative's purpose is.
All right, then I'm fine with that. I will issue a limiting instruction to the jury, and I will overrule the objection.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask you one more question about the 19th to the 24th. Did you find any evidence that the defendant talked to anyone about Dawn Clark's disappearance that week?
No, we did not.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Guarnieri. Cross-examination, Mr. Wright?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Of course.
Good morning, Agent.
Good morning, Counselor.
Now, I want to get right into it. You never found the body of Dawn Clark, did you?
No, we did not.
You never found a murder weapon in today's case?
No, sir.
You never found any signs of a struggle when you investigated the elephant park?
No.
Now, I want to talk about Dawn Clark's ex-wife, Lisa Clark. You're familiar with her, correct?
Yes.
She told you that Dawn Clark deserved to die.
Objection,
Yes.
hearsay.
Your Honor, may it be heard?
Yes, Mr. Wright?
Your Honor, we're not offering this for the truth of the matter asserted, that it did in fact, Dawn did in fact deserve to die, but rather how hearing this information affected the investigation of Agent Branham, her subsequent actions.
Could you clear something up for me, Mr. Wright? Who specifically made the statement?
Don Clark's ex-wife, Lisa Clark.
Okay. Ms. Guarnieri, your response?
Your Honor, if opposing counsel is not using it for the truth of the matter asserted, we would request a limiting instruction for the jury to not take this for the truth, but rather for the effect it had.
I'm absolutely fine with that. I will issue a limiting instruction to that effect.
Yes, Your Honor.
May I proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Yeah, Mr. Wright.
Agent Brandon, that's a yes. She did tell you that Don Clark deserved to die?
Yes, sir.
You never had a chance to interview her, did you?
No, we did not. She refused to cooperate.
Right, and after she refused, you didn't pursue her any further.
No, we did not.
And so you don't know what her whereabouts were on August 18th of 2017.
We were not able to secure an alibi for Lisa Clark, no.
Now, I want to talk to you about Costa Rica. Don Clark liked to visit Costa Rica frequently, right?
To my knowledge, yes.
Ms. Catelier, can you bring up Exhibit 27 for us? Now, you recognize this, true?
Yes, it's a Cessna airplane that we found parked about 5 miles away from his home when he was reported missing.
This is Don Clark's Cessna plane.
Yes.
And he would take this plane and he'd fly to Costa Rica, right?
Yes, he would.
You learned that was around every month or so.
About every month, to my knowledge, yes, sir.
Ms. Catelier, can you bring up Exhibit 4 for us? Now, you recognize this as well, correct?
Yes.
Now, from this document, you learned that Don Clark had money that was off the books, true?
Yes, we did.
You learned that he was planning on using that money to purchase additional properties.
Yes, and he was supposed to give that money to his lawyer, Manny Timonelli, but we were informed that he disappeared before he was able to give that money.
You were also informed that Don Clark was making sure that his wife didn't know about it, right?
We were informed that Ms. Vasta did not know of this money, yes.
Ms. Catelier, can you bring up Exhibit 21 for us, please? Agent, you recognize Exhibit 21, correct?
Yes, these are the phone call records of Don Clark.
Now, from these phone call records, you can see that Don Clark received 2 text messages on August 18th, 2017, correct?
Yes.
These came from Costa Rica?
2 of them did at 6 p.m. Yes, sir.
And also around 6 p.m., he had a phone call with someone, right?
Yes, he did.
That lasted about 52 minutes.
Yes.
You learned that that also came from Costa Rica.
Yes, it came from San Jose, Costa Rica, sir.
But you never investigated the person on the other end of that phone, did you?
No, we did not.
You have no idea who that person is.
No, we do not know who that person is.
Thank you, Agent Brandon. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Ms. Guarnieri, do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Before the redirect, can I ask opposing counsel to take down their demonstrative? Agent Branham, do you know if there was ever an investigation conducted in Costa Rica?
Yes, we had actually the Costa Rican police check to see if Don Clark was present in Costa Rica.
Did they find him in Costa Rica?
No, during the investigation, they did not.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, with nothing further, Agent Branham, you're excused. Thank you so much for your testimony. And do we have a second witness, Ms. Guarnieri?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the prosecution rests.
All right. Mr. Wright, it's your case in chief. Go ahead and call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Joe Young to the stand.
Hi there. Good morning.
Ms. Young, you can sit a little further back if you need.
All right, I'm not used to being on this side of the camera.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Ms. Young.
Good morning.
Can you introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Yes, of course. Hi there. My name is Jo Ann Yun, and I'm a TV producer.
Well, are you familiar with my client, Kara Bassett?
Oh, yeah. I've worked with Kara for a while now.
What'd you work with her on?
Back in 2015, Kara reached out to me to film a documentary about her and her elephants. When I went down there, I looked at the property and I looked at the elephants and I thought, hey, this would make a great TV. So I started filming back in 2015.
How long did your arrangement with Miss Bassett last?
We ended in 2018 up until her arrest, so about 3 years.
I want to talk to you about August 18th of 2017. Do you recall where you were on that day?
Yes, I was at the elephant park.
While you were at the elephant park, what were you doing?
Well, I'm the TV producer. I have to make sure that the audience is living the story through my camera angles. So I'm filming the elephants, I'm talking with Dawn, I'm talking with Kara, I'm there.
You said you were talking with Dawn and Kara. Did you ever see the two of them interacting with one another?
Oh, sure. That day they were talking about Costa Rica, not sure about an upcoming trip or a trip that already happened.
Hearsay.
Your Honor, may be heard.
Yes, Mr. Wright.
We're not offering this for its truth, but rather the effect it had on Miss Young, if I may make an offer of proof. We suspect that Miss Young will testify later in this direct examination that she actually went to Costa Rica to look for Don Clark based on the information she knew about how much he enjoyed Costa Rica.
Ms. Guarnieri, your response?
Your Honor, this conversation occurred in August of 2017, and the trip opposing counsel is referring to was over a year later. Saying that a conversation from a year ago could have had an effect on the listener is a stretch of that exception, Your Honor.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
Opposing counsel said that she's right. This was in August of 2017. However, that is also when Don Clark went missing. It's the defense's contention that that's when he went to Costa Rica.
Okay, with that, I'm going to overrule the objection. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Young, when you were listening to their conversation, did you hear anything on the side of Kara Bassett?
Yeah, she had said, sweetheart, it's all right if you go without me.
Now, I want to talk to you about your relationship with Don Clark. Did you have a chance to speak with him on August 18th?
Oh, yeah, we were talking about my upcoming trip to Mexico and just about life.
Now, before we get into that, do you recall being presented with phone records while you were on an interview with 64 Minutes?
Yes, I was. I was shown Mr. Clark's phone records, actually.
Ms. Catelier, can you bring up Exhibit 21 for us? Ms. Young, do you recognize Exhibit 21?
Yes, this is the same exhibit I was shown when I was on that 64 Minutes.
Now, at around 6 p.m. on that day, Don Clark received 2 text messages. Do you see those?
It looks like, yes, those were both from Costa Rica.
Don Clark also received a phone call on that day. Do you see that?
Yeah, again, from Costa Rica. That phone call was so weird. It was when me and Don were talking. We were talking about my trip to Mexico. And then he looks down at his phone. Face goes white. And then he just says, I have to take this, and walks away. It was bizarre.
You said that his face went white. How did he appear to you?
In my perception, I would have just assumed he was terrified. Like, he went as white as a ghost.
Ms. Young, I want to talk further about your relationship with Don Clark. Were the two of you close?
Well, we were professionals. Being that producer, you're living with them. My job is to get the audience to live vicariously through the story I'm presenting. My story was Dawn, Kara, and the elephants. I'm always there with that camera.
Oh, with concern to your story concerning Don Clark, were you familiar with what Don Clark loved to do?
Oh yeah, he loved to go to Costa Rica. Went all the time.
Well, did you ever have a chance to go to Costa Rica with him?
With him? I've been to Costa Rica. Yeah.
Oh, when you went to Costa Rica, what were you doing there?
Well, you see, I knew the FBI were investigating the disappearance of Don Clark, but I mean, this was just weird. Don Clark disappeared. So I went to Costa Rica to see if he was there.
At what point did you become aware that Don Clark was missing?
I found out when I came back from that trip to Mexico that I was talking about.
When you got back from your trip from Mexico, what was happening?
I went to the elephant park, thought it was going to be a normal day of filming, and the FBI are there.
What were the FBI investigating?
The disappearance of Don Clark. Turns out he just vanished. I mean, it's really sad. I don't know what happened.
Do you have any examples of places at the park they were investigating?
Yes, they looked at, they were all around the park, and then what I saw was mainly in the shed area where the tranquilizers were kept.
Did you see any agents handling tranquilizers?
Yeah, one young agent was actually grabbing some of the tranquilizers off the ground without gloves.
Now, I want to talk to you about what you had mentioned a moment ago concerning Costa Rica. You said you went to Costa Rica. What did you
Yes.
find while you were there?
Well, don't worry, the FBI already knows, but I did sneak into Mr. Clark's house. But there I found the fan was on, clothes were in Mr. Clark's closet, and the place was clean. Like, there was no dust anywhere. I mean, bizarre.
How long were you in Costa Rica for?
I stayed there for a week. I looked in the house, and I even talked to some locals.
Well, from talking to locals, what did you learn?
I learned some of them had seen Mr. Clark.
Objection, hearsay, and lack of foundation, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes, Mr. Wright?
Your Honor, Ms. Young has already laid the foundation that she went to Costa Rica and she interviewed the locals. Now, as to the hearsay portion of her objection, we're not offering this for the truth of the matter asserted, but what she did after that.
Can you give me an offer of proof of exactly what she did after hearing these?
Of course, Your Honor. After Ms. Young learned that Don Clark was potentially seen there, she stopped her investigation. She came back home.
Okay, Ms. Guarnieri?
First of all, we have no foundation as to how she gathered the knowledge that Don Clark was in Costa Rica, or whether she asked them if they knew who he was, or if she showed them a picture, and if she did show them a picture, if the picture they used was time relevant. Additionally, if they're not using it for the truth of the matter, which Don Clark could have been in Costa Rica, we would ask the jury to disregard. However, we believe that this evidence is going to the truth, as they're trying to say Don Clark was in Costa Rica, so she stopped her investigation, using it for the truth that he was there.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
Well, as to the foundation, a moment ago, we heard Ms. Young say that she talked to the locals while she was in Costa Rica. That's the foundation. She had a chance to speak with them. She was able to learn about where Don Clark's whereabouts may have been. And as to the hearsay, we've already stated we're not offering it for the truth. We're offering it to show where her investigation into the disappearance of Don Clark ended.
I'm going to sustain the objection and strike the statements by the locals that they have seen Don Clark.
Yes,
Yes.
Your Honor. Now, Ms. Young, after you had a chance to look into Costa Rica, what'd you do?
I went back to the elephant park.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. We'll take a moment, Ms. Guarnieri, cross-examination when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Young, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
You mentioned on direct examination that you were filming a documentary. You began filming in 2015, correct?
Yes, I did.
And for every month that you remained on the project, you were paid $5,000, correct?
Yeah.
These payments stopped in October of 2018.
Yes.
And that's when the defendant was arrested, correct?
September of 2018, actually.
Yes. Well, I'd like to talk to you about how you knew the defendant. You knew her from your work at the elephant park.
Oh, yeah. I was there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
When you spoke with her on the property, she told you about a log they kept of the elephant tranquilizers, correct?
Well, that's one thing she said. Yeah, they had to keep a log. Apparently, the tranquilizers are pretty dangerous.
And you described her as meticulous about this log, correct?
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to talk to you about some of the footage you have of Miss Bassett. You conducted an interview with her on June 15th, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of separate footages of that interview.
Well, one of these footages is Exhibit 35, correct?
Yes, one of them is Exhibit 35.
And Exhibit 35 is a fair and accurate representation of the interview you conducted.
Oh, yeah, that's what you told me.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution offers Exhibit 35 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, will be so admitted.
If my co-counsel could please play that video for the court.
Zoos exist to make people happy. Sanctuaries exist to make animals happy. And anyone who can't see the difference shouldn't be around animals.
Now, when Don was at the park, Kara said he was running it like a zoo, correct?
Yes, it was a zoo.
The elephants were in cages, correct?
Not all the time.
Well, during the day, all of the elephants were kept in cages, correct?
That's true.
And Kara wanted to run it like a sanctuary, correct?
Yeah, you see, this is just kind of one of the way like opposites attract. Dawn was in the business, looking at more numbers. Kara loved the elephants. It worked.
Well, you actually witnessed them fight about this on several occasions, correct?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes.
In one of these fights, you witnessed Kara throw a vase at Dawn's head, correct?
Yeah, it would have made great camera too, but, you know, it wasn't what the documentary was focusing on.
Kara made you delete the footage of these fights, correct?
Yeah, again, we wanted the focus to be on the elephants, not on the drama. It just confused things.
I'd like to put back up on the screen Exhibit 21 from your direct examination. These are Don Clark's phone records, correct?
Yes, they are.
He received a text message from Lisa Clark on August 23rd, correct?
Yeah.
He also received a phone call from Lisa Clark on August 20th, correct?
Yes, he did.
And both of these were after he disappeared, correct?
He disappeared on the 18th, so yes, both of those were one after he disappeared.
Well, if you could direct your attention to Exhibit 22, these are Kara Clark's phone records, correct?
And that's what it says, yes.
You were shown these during your interview with 64 Minutes, correct?
Yep.
Now, according to these logs, Kara never texted Dawn after August 18th, correct?
No, she didn't.
And these logs also say that she never called Don Clark after August 18th.
She called him on the 18th.
That wasn't my question. My question was, she never called Don Clark after August 18th. Isn't that correct?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, she did not.
When you got back from your trip to Mexico, she was running the elephant park, correct?
Yes, she was. She was doing a great job too.
Now you're familiar with Exhibit 8, correct?
Yes, I am.
Exhibit 8 is a picture of the elephant park from when Don Clark was alive, correct?
Yes, those were the cages they were kept in.
Well, my co-counsel could put up Exhibits 23 through 25. This was the elephant park 2 months after Don disappeared.
Yes.
Kara had gotten rid of the cages.
Yes, she had. Well, she had to keep them for medical purposes, but they were able to roam free more often.
And she had turned the park into a sanctuary, correct?
Yes, she had a baby elephant sanctuary.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about your trip to Costa Rica.
All right.
As you said on direct examination, you had to sneak into the house, correct?
Yeah, but the FBI already know. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for that one.
When you got inside the house, you found all the lights were off, correct?
Yeah, they were.
You found no food in the fridge,
No.
and you found no toiletries on the property.
No toiletries were there.
You stayed in Costa Rica for an entire week, correct?
Yes, I did.
You visited that property every single day, correct?
Yes.
You never saw Don Clark enter the property.
Well, no, this was a year after he disappeared.
You never saw Don Clark anywhere on that property.
No.
You yourself never saw Don Clark in Costa Rica.
No.
You haven't seen Don Clark since August 18th, 2017.
No.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Guarnieri. Mr. Wright, do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Of course.
Ms. Young, opposing counsel was asking you about your filming at the park. Now, how many hours or so do you have from filming at the park?
I have to have over 2,000 hours of footage.
Did the FBI ever ask for that footage?
No. I offered it to them. They didn't want it.
What about the police?
Again, offered it, didn't want it.
Did anyone ever ask for your footage?
No. The only footage we have is what I provided in today's case, those interviews with the defendant. Otherwise, everything remains in the documentary.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions. May Ms. Young please be excused?
She may. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the defense rests at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Okay. At this time, I want to ask my fellow scoring attorneys, if anyone needs a break, now would be the perfect time before we move into closing argument. If anyone does need a break, I'm happy to give a quick 2-minute recess. So why don't we go ahead and we'll do 2 minutes. We'll come back at, I believe, 9:50 or so, and then we'll move into closing arguments. Okay. Scoring attorneys are back. Wonderful. Okay, we'll now hear closing arguments from each party. Just a reminder again, everyone should please switch back to speaker view at this point. Yeah, and also since both witnesses have completed their testimony, scoring attorneys, you can complete the witness portion of your ballot. Take a moment to do that, and then Ms. Guarnieri, when you're ready, you can begin with your closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, before I begin, may I reserve any remaining time for a rebuttal?
Absolutely.
May I proceed?
You may.
She wanted to take control, so she had to take his life. The defendant, Kara Bassett, wanted complete control over the elephant park her husband ran. So she eliminated the one thing in her way of control, Don Clark. Members of the jury, today, as the prosecution, we have the burden of proof. It's our job to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant murdered Don Clark with malice aforethought, meaning she planned to and intentionally killed Don Clark. And today, we have met our burden. We have provided you with a mountain of evidence that unmistakably points to the defendant. We showed you that her planning started back in May of 2017 with a power of attorney document. She had Don Clark sign it with an uncommon disappearance clause that gave her complete control if he disappeared. And on August 18th, she made sure he did. After hours, after everyone else was away from the park, she attacked. She injected Don with a syringe of carfentanil in a dosage high enough to kill him 10 times. She put his body into a wheelchair and drove 139 miles to the isolated Big Gum Swamp, where she left his body in the alligator-infested waters. And to this day, no one has heard or seen Dawn Clark. After she left his body in the Big Gum Swamp, she waited. And she waited. You heard that she waited an entire week to report her husband missing because she had to be sure all evidence of her activity at Big Gum Swamp was erased. And she thought her plan was perfect. But when the FBI started investigating, they started finding the evidence she left behind. And today, Agent Steph Branham told you about this evidence. She told you about the GPS records from a property van that showed on the night of August 18th, a vehicle went from the Elephant Park all the way to the Big Gum Swamp. She then told you about forensic evidence tying the defendant to Big Gum Swamp. A rare combination of algae found on the defendant's boot, a park wheelchair, and the van matched a rare combination of algae at the Big Gum Swamp. She then told you about the murder weapon, a syringe of carfentanil the defendant took almost 2 weeks before she killed Dawn. You see, the defendant every time wrote down the elephant she used the syringe on, except for August of 2017. And nobody today could tell you for sure that this tranquilizer was used on an elephant, because it wasn't. Now, today, we also showed you evidence of what the defendant did in the week her husband was missing. She didn't call Dawn. She didn't text Dawn. She waited. And finally, on the 25th, she reported her husband missing. And you then saw this letter from Mandy Tuminelli, where it said that the disappearance clause that gave her control wasn't ordinary. In fact, it was only in the document because the defendant wanted it. Finally, we showed you a video of the defendant, a video where she told you,
zoos exist to make people happy. Sanctuaries exist to make animals happy. And anyone who can't see the difference shouldn't be around animals.
Dawn ran the park like a zoo, and the defendant wanted it to be a sanctuary. So she made sure Dawn would never be around animals again. And within 2 months of his disappearance, she'd taken control and changed the park into a sanctuary. Today, members of the jury, we have shown you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant murdered Dawn Clark, that the defendant wanted to take control. So on August 18th, she took Dawn Clark's life. It's because of this that we ask you to find the defendant guilty for Dawn Clark's murder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guarnieri.
A moment to rearrange, Your Honor.
Of course. And whenever you're ready, Mr. Wright.
The government's case cuts corners. Members of the jury, a moment ago, opposing counsel stood here and she told you that my client killed Dawn Clark. But she couldn't prove it in today's case. I remind you, until they're found guilty, someone is presumed to be innocent. They told you that this case is about control. But that's not what the evidence shows us. The evidence shows us that the government cut corners. Agent Branham cut corners in her investigation. You heard today that Agent Branham failed to investigate all witnesses. Agent Branham didn't pursue all potential suspects. She didn't even bother looking into reasonable alternatives to the evidence. And that's what the government's asking you to do today as well. But that's not what the law requires. The law requires you take a look at all of the evidence, and if you find even one reasonable alternative to that evidence, decide on behalf of Kara Bassett. So let's take a look at that evidence you saw in trial today. Now, members of the jury, the government presented you with a power of attorney document. They said this proves that Don Clark was murdered. No, it doesn't. It shows that Don Clark had signed of his own free will. His attorney can confirm that. It shows that he wanted to take precautions in case something happened to him, which isn't unreasonable considering he would fly to Costa Rica frequently in his own airplane. Members of the jury, they brought you a carfentanil syringe. They said that this must be the murder weapon. So where is it? They couldn't bring it to you today. They're asking you to jump and make gaps in the evidence today with your imagination. They want you to imagine how it was used, how it was obtained, and that Kara Bassett's the one that used it. That's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They also brought you phone records. Showed you phone records and said Kara Bassett didn't contact her husband, Don Clark, for over a week after his disappearance. But we have no phone records from previous times Don Clark went to Costa Rica. How do we know that Don Clark and Kara Bassett don't talk while he's in Costa Rica? But what we do know is that on August 18th, a mysterious caller contacted Don Clark. The government has no idea who that is because they never even looked. Members of the jury, that's the case that the government is resting upon. But what about what they failed to present? You ever heard an alibi for Don Clark's ex-wife, Lisa Clark? They never explained the off-the-books money that Don Clark had for additional purchases of property in Costa Rica. They never explained why they didn't look into Miss Young's 2,000 hours of footage. They never watched that footage. They never even asked for that footage. Members of the jury, the government has failed to meet their burden in today's case. They've charged Kara Bassett with the murder of Don Clark, and they can't even prove that he's dead. They've made gaps with the evidence, and they've cut corners with their case. That's why we ask you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Rebuttal, Your Honor.
Of course, proceed when you're ready.
Members of the jury, Don Clark is dead. The defendant made sure of that on August 18th, 2017. And she did it again on August 18th, 2017, when she had him declared legally dead. Today, we have provided you with a mountain of evidence the defense cannot climb over. The GPS records, the forensic report, the syringe of carfentanil, the power of attorney document, and the lack of communication all unmistakably point to Kara as the killer. Today, in this trial, we have shown you that the defendant was the only person with the means, motive, and opportunity to kill Don Clark. She wanted to take control. So she took his life. That's why we ask that you find the defendant guilty for Don's murder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guarnieri. With that, at this time, I'd ask that the scoring judges please complete the ballots and click submit. And I'll ask everyone to stay on until all ballots